Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I'm Zach, and we're going to put something in the oven, we're going to bake it a little bit, and we're going to hope it comes out just fine because I'm really not sure what today is going to look like. So, in order to help me bake this on in, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are you doing today?
Zach, I'm phenomenal. I am in what do they say? Warm and cheerful San Mateo, California. And it is you know what? It's a different place than where I live now in Indianapolis, or where we used to live in Nashville, or even where you are in Minneapolis. So I know a lot of people here and they love living here. And you know what? I like living in Indiana, and hey, it is all good, as they say. Hey, thanks, listeners, for being here and for joining us today. We are a global top 10% podcast, and we have you to thank. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle.com. And Zach, we are all over the internet. In fact, you know what? The other day I got on this flight to come out here, and I plugged my phone into the charger cord when I was on the airplane, and a little message popped up on my phone, and it said, "Listen to the Buff." It's what it said right there on the airplane. So we are everywhere out there. All right. If you are new to the podcast, welcome. We're glad you're here. So give us I don't know, 4 episodes or so, and see if we don't provide you something that gives you a reason to come back for more. And remember, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And Zach, they should subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Do you remember why?
I think I get some brownies out of that deal.
You get brownies, and I get chocolate pudding, and that is, I tell you, the chocolate pudding thing has changed my life, and we'll tell you about that here in a little bit.
Yeah, you are if I'm not mistaken, according to your LinkedIn status, you are a world record renowned pudding consumer. Now, I mean, so you have a new title that you get to showcase and show off a bit.
Yeah, like when you do the frequent flyer miles on the airplane, you can get to like the million-mile member club or something like that, and you get to, I don't know, you get a little wing, you get some wings and stuff. And like I've eaten enough chocolate pudding now that I have a little golden spoon that I got from the Jello pudding. No, I didn't really get that, but and pudding is a lot of fun. And we figured, why not do an episode on things that really matter? Quite frankly, Zach, to us. All right, you know what? These are things that are important to us. And I thought, you know what? Let's have a little discussion about pudding.
Yeah, so tell us about pudding, because other than the fact that you like to eat it, and it sometimes comes in chocolate flavor, and sometimes you don't like the flavors that aren't chocolate, we don't know a lot about your pudding taste or your pudding history or your pudding um, expertise.
Yeah, well, pudding is a great thing. It's certainly it is pretty much everything. Anything can be pudding. Did you know that? It was like pudding it means different things to the Americans than it does to the English and to the other Europeans. And like all sorts of great food, pudding actually comes out of the Middle East. Did you know that? Like it's like 1,000 years old. It came out of somewhere like in Arabia, and they created this idea. You take stuff, basically, if you take anything liquidy, and then you have to, I'm going to say, gellify it. You have to make it so it's not runny anymore. It can be a little bit loose and hopefully a little bit jiggly. All right. So if you take something runny and gooey and make it jiggly, then you have made a pudding. And pudding can be like sweet. Like most of us in the U.S. think of Jello pudding, right? Because Bill Cosby did a Jello pudding way back in the day, and you get a little cup and you tear the top off and you eat it with a spoon, and it's just gooey. It's a lot like me, Zach. It's just kind of a gooey chocolate mess, and it's sweet, just like me, and it just makes you feel good all over. That's how most Americans think about pudding. But there's other kinds of pudding. Okay, so like, The pudding we like is like creamy milk based
No,
desserts.
that's what you like.
No, we
You
American,
like
most Americans
desserts.
do that. Okay, it's dessert stuff. Okay, and you can use anything you want to thicken it, cornstarch or gelatin or whatever. But in general, pudding can be anything. So like the English puddings, you can make blood pudding, Zach, which is like a sausage kind of stuff. And haggis. You know what haggis is? You take all sorts of stuff and you cram it into the intestines or the stomach of a sheep and you bake it. That's haggis, and that's a pudding. Okay, you can make rice pudding, and you can make like everybody who has been out there and who's a cook right now is going, well, let me tell you about the cinnamon mince pudding we used to make or something like that. Pudding can be like pretty much anything to anybody as long as you start kind of runny and you cook it and it solidifies.
Yeah, okay. So one of those things that starts kind of running and becomes solidified is one of my favorite desserts, a creme brulee, which you then get to light on fire later. But creme brulee is not actually a pudding,
Well,
right?
well, see and this is where it gets a little tricky, okay? Because there's pudding and then there's custard, right? Which is custard is what you use to thicken it. You add eggs, right? Or the egg protein coagulates and makes it thick, right? As opposed to using something like cornstarch. You know, if you start with meat juice and add cornstarch, you get gravy. And if you boil it down, cook it a lot, then you would get like gravy pudding. At the end of the meal, the gravy gets kind of thick. Okay, it's essentially it's pudding. Okay, so anytime anytime you move from liquidy to jiggly, that's going in the pudding direction, right? So you can make the argument that a custard is a kind of pudding, and I'm sure what we're going to do is we're going to get hit by all sorts of, who's that angry chef guy who does Hell's Kitchen?
Gordon Ramsay.
Ramsay. He's going to call us up and he's like, "You guys suck! It's not pudding, it's custard." And we'll be like,
But is custard a type of pudding? This goes down.
I would
the
say
square
custard,
rectangle
yes.
question.
I would say custard is pudding, but pudding is not necessarily custard.
Right. So on the hierarchy of you got your pudding, and then underneath pudding you got different types, and then you have custard, and underneath custard you have different types of custard. Right. One of those being creme brulee.
Right, and I thought you were going with the thing you like that is kind of that's a custard, which is a kind of pudding, is pumpkin pie, and pumpkin pie is a classic example of something going from slick to something gooey when you bake it, and so is a quiche, right? So
okay, I disagree. A quiche is an egg pie.
It's an egg pie, but it starts running.
Is a pie on our hierarchy? Does pie fall under pudding? Like we know custard does.
The filling does. I bet the filling would. All right, and my mother.
So an apple pie is a pudding.
No, I don't think so. I think
this argument isn't holding up for you.
Well, see, maybe it is. I'll bet there's puddings that are like you can make like raisin plum pudding. All right, and the Brits do that, and they take stuff.
Have you seen British food? It's not very good.
Until they put that Indian spice in it, it makes it great. So, but there's a lot. So pudding is great, but I love like the American. I'm American, Zach. Okay, I like the chocolate gooey. Whatever it's made out is probably made out of plastic or something. It's probably made out of petroleum. It would be my guess. Is the Jello pudding that I eat is chocolate flavored and it's cool and it's jiggly and it makes me feel
like a 7-year-old.
All right, but I like the Jello pudding cups, okay? Because they're everywhere. They're ubiquitous here in the States. You can get the refrigerated kind or the kind you just put on the shelf. Okay, but this week, Zach, at the office, I'm here visiting the office here in San Mateo. And the wonderful lady that helps keep the office stocked and keeps us all in our little chairs doing our work, she asked what we like, and she was like, "We'll get you whatever you need." I was like, "Can you give me some chocolate pudding?" She was like, "Okay." So she went, Zach, and she got us chocolate pudding for the fridge here, but she got us something I've never had. She got us Hershey's chocolate pudding, which was was not the same as the Jello chocolate pudding, but it was very good. It was substantially stiffer than the Jello pudding cup. If you take the pudding cup and you shake it, it moves in the cup and you can shake it and get it kind of fluffed. But this Hershey's pudding was not fluffable. It was very it was fixed. It's not going anywhere. A lot like creme brulee, like a custard, it's not going to go anywhere. But But that's
But did you take a torch and light it on fire? Or
no, I did not caramelize the top. No, I did
okay,
not.
here's a question: would you be interested in a chocolate creme brulee?
Um, I think I would. Now, do a lot of people put less tiramisu with the see? I'm not a coffee guy, right?
Well, this isn't. I didn't ask you
No,
about
but I'm
coffee.
saying I always get these mixed up. So there's creme brulee and then there's tiramisu,
Tiramisu is a cake based dessert.
but it's got like some goo in it, right?
Yeah, but it's not in the family of puddings and custards and
Well,
creme
what's the
brulees.
goo? What's the goo?
I don't know. I'm not
It
an.
might be pudding.
Well,
I mean,
there's this ice cream in Minneapolis here. If you ever go to the ice cream shop known as Sebastian Joe's, which is number one on Zach's ice cream shops ranked in Minneapolis, they have a flavor that is called formerly known as Nicollet Avenue Pothole, which is a reference to the artist formerly known as Prince. And one of the ingredients in this flavor, known as the flavor formerly known as Nicollet Avenue Pothole, is pudding. So they add pudding into the ice cream.
okay, I've done that. And your brother-in-law, one day we were sitting around eating ice cream, and he was like, "Well, we just have vanilla. I don't have anything to put on it." And I was like, "Well, you know what I like to put on ice cream is the hot cocoa mix, right?"
Yes.
But we didn't have any of that, but we did have some chocolate pudding, and we put the pudding in with the ice cream. And if you haven't done that, you'll be telling your grandkids, I remember where I was when I heard on Bufnagle the podcast that you can put pudding on ice. You remember that day that you heard it here first. Yeah, so that's where we are with pudding. I like the chocolate pudding because it's sweet.
So a
And
chocolate creme brulee would be something you
I
would be
would go with the
interested in.
chocolate creme brulee. It'd be interesting to me what would happen when you put sugar on the top, right, and you fire it to make
Yeah,
that
and light it on
glaze.
fire.
Yeah, that's that.
I
I
think
could go
the
for that.
coloring of it would not look great because the nice thing about the creme brulee is that vanilla white cream color, and
Yeah,
then you put the sugar on top and you light it on fire, and you get that dark caramelized sugar color,
but
which really contrasts well with the cream color of the base of the custard.
and you don't put a crust on that at all.
No, you put it in a ramekin, and then you just kind of eat it out of the ramekin.
Yeah. So, but I'm thinking like I wonder if you would put like that pudding in a crust of some kind, either a little graham cracker crust or a little baked pastry crust, and then
And
you'd
then I
have
think
like
you
a
end up
little
with pudding pie.
or a tart.
You end up with, I think that's all pudding pie.
Okay. All right. And then, but I'm thinking, okay, so I agree with you about the color. Then you'd have the dark pudding, and the burned top would be like you don't. But if you had it in a crust, that would give you enough contrast. You'd have like the light color crust. You'd have the dark pudding, and then when you fire it up, maybe maybe that gives you enough contrast at that point. If you had a
I
crust,
don't know. Maybe you have to go to the Bufnagle kitchens and figure that one out.
we are going to have to work on that. The other thing that people always bring up is gelato, and the
Well,
gelato's not
gelato is an ice cream sub more than a pudding sub.
Yeah, it's. I don't think it's. I think I think if you have to freeze it to get it to thicken, then this we're not. That's not what we're talking about. But the gelato I had last night was phenomenal, and it was dark chocolate gelato from this place down here in Palo Alto. You know what I learned about Palo Alto?
No,
You know what that means, Palo Alto?
Palo Alto in Spanish.
It means it's actually short for El Palo Alto, which is the Palo Alto, which is the tall pole.
I was right.
Yeah, and it's named after a really big tree, one of those redwoods, and there are a lot of those redwoods down here, Zach. They are amazing trees. It's very impressive. So there was this really big tall tree, and that's why it's on the Stanford logo. That's the tree. That's the Palo Alto.
Is,
It's
is
the
the
big pole.
is the cardinal is the Stanford Cardinal?
Yeah, they used to be something else, and then they got offensive, so they changed it.
But they're the Cardinal now. They've been the Cardinal.
No, they were the Indians.
Well, for my lifetime, I
Well,
believe they've
right.
been
Oh,
the Cardinal.
I don't know.
And Stanford Cal, that game was the Cardinal against the Bears.
I don't think it was the Cardinal at that point. I don't think they were yet. We could ask.
Well,
We
we
could
can
ask that
debate
way.
this some other time.
We can look that up. Okay, but
That's a great game, but that's a different point.
the other thing, I'm going to do two things with pudding, Zach, and these are I'm not done there yet. Is I want to see what happens if I take just regular old pudding and I whip it and like add air into it. As I think I might get like a mousse, right?
Okay.
Right, and then the
Okay,
other thing.
when would you do that? Would you bake the pudding and then would you whip it, or would you whip it and then bake the pudding? Because I think the step of the whipping matters.
Oh, when you whip it, right?
Yeah,
No, I knew some people that always add that whipped cream
whipped
stuff in
cream.
the ham. They add it to the pudding and then stir it in. You can fold it in, maybe. All right, and then, I think you would have to do it as it's setting to get the air in it to hold it. So you'd have to kind of maybe you have to do it
Like a meringue.
maybe like a meringue. I don't. We need some chefs to come on here, and you guys know who you are, so you will be called in to answer this question for us and do some experiments. But anyway, those are things we like to do with pudding, and I would like to make my own pudding from scratch. I would like to see how to make sweet chocolate pudding from scratch. But okay, Zach, there's this great thing. Okay, so some fun things about pudding. Okay, back in the early days of the internet, back in the wild west days of the internet, it wasn't like all choreographed and well curated like it is now, where there's like every newspaper has its site, and that's where there were just people who would just write stuff and put it out on the internet, and it would just be there. And I remember
That's kind of like what we're doing.
We are in the golden wild west days of podcasting. Is where we are. We are like this is like
We're like Billy the Kid of podcast.
we are. I was going to say Bonnie and Clyde, but I wasn't sure who was who. But that was, who we are. We are.
Johnny Thunder and
No, we are Redford and Newman. That's who we are.
okay.
That's who we are. Okay, so all right. No, well, back in the day, I remember early on when you could just cruise the internet and you'd find all sorts of weird things out on this whole LinkedIn world that we have. There was this. If you go to the Google machine, you type "Legend of Pudding Guy," you will hear this remarkable story of back in the day. Okay, there's this guy. His name is David Phillips, and he was an engineer. He's probably still an engineer, right? And in May of 1999, okay, so that was 20 some years ago, he saw this promotion from Healthy Choice Foods. You ever heard of them?
Nope.
Okay, so they make foods. They make
healthy choice foods.
They make like TV dinners or little single serving dinners, and they would make like soup and they made these things, and for every 10 UPC symbols, those are the barcodes.
Yep.
For every 10 UPC symbols that you would send into them, they would give you 500 frequent flyer miles to use on any airline you wanted. All right, so this guy was like, he's at the store and he did the math pretty quick, and he was like, well, a can of soup is 90 cents and I can get 500 miles for that. That's pretty awesome. And then he read the fine print, and if you mail them in by the end of May 1999, you get double the points. All right, so you'd get 1,000 miles for every 10 UPC codes. I know I wrote 100 in the notes, Zach, okay, but for every 10 codes, you get 1,000 miles. Okay, so for every can of soup, that's 100 miles. Now, granted, you fly from like San Mateo down to LA, it can't be more than a couple hundred miles. And that'll cost you like $2 in soup, or maybe $3 in soup. And he was like, well, I can do that. So he bought all the cans of soup at the store, right? And then he went to his local warehouse food thing, and he found that they had Healthy Choice pudding, which is probably an oxymoron, right? And they were 25 cents per carton, and the cartons came like 4 or 8 in a carton, and there was a UPC symbol on each thing, and there was one on the carton. So you got like one bonus one. So you buy 4, get 1 free kind of UPC codes. Okay, so he was like, this is great. These are 25 cents a piece. So he bought out the whole store. And then this is where you start seeing that this guy has done the math.
This is the guy from the math problems from high school of, somebody buys 60 watermelons at this many price per pound, but it's discounted at this rate. What is the gravity of the elephant?
When will the train get to Toledo, right? All right, so he went to 10 other warehouse stores. It was like, super warehouse, right? Yep. And he bought all the pudding in all the stores that were in his vicinity. I forget, he was in LA or he was out here in San Francisco, where he was. Okay. And then he went to the manager and he said, can you get me some more? And the manager was like, yeah, I can do that. And he said, I would like 60 cases. So he bought everything he could find with this pudding. Okay. In all, he bought 12,000 containers of pudding. Okay. And it resulted in over 1.2 million frequent flyer miles.
That's a lot of frequent flyer miles.
That's a lot of frequent flyer miles. And those of you who are on the Million Mile Club, you're like, really? This guy bought his way into the million? Yes, he did. Yes, he did. Okay. And then, but this was in May. And in order to get the double points, he had to mail them by the 31st of May. All right. So what he did is he went to the food bank and he said to the food bank, hey, you got people sitting around here with nothing to do or volunteers? I'll tell you what, I'll give you all this pudding if you help me peel off the stickers with the UPC codes. So he peeled off all 12,000 of them, and he took photos of all of them, and he mailed them registered mail to the Healthy Choice Company. And then they were like, "Oh, we didn't get what you sent." And he was like, "No. I had registered mail. Here it is. It says right here that you received it. Timmy signed or whatever it was on the thing." And they tried to stiff him, but then he was like, "No." So they finally gave him the points. Okay. In the end, because he bought the soup and he bought the pudding, he ended up with 1.253 million miles from the pudding and soup. Okay. And he put over 1 million miles of that into his American Airlines account, and he put the others on different airlines so his families could. They flew to Europe on a vacation. All right. His overall cost for that was about $3,000. He got 1 million frequent flyer miles for about $3,000.
And a free trip to Europe.
And now he's a Million Mile member. Okay. And so there's some other stories about him trying to milk this even further. So the great thing about when those things first start out is it's so loosey goosey, nobody realizes where the holes are. Right. And you would do that. You could get you get frequent flyer miles, Zach, on.
But you did it with the Mountain Dew caps. I remember when I was
a kid. Yeah, the Mountain Dew caps. Okay, so here's what they ran this thing one time. You buy a bottle of Dew, and on the inside of the cap, it had one of the NFL team names. Okay, so it would say Jaguars, or it would say Cardinals or Bears or something like that. Well, it was NFL team, so it did say Bears, right? And then so, and I read, I was like, what do you do? And they said if you collect 2 caps that have the same name, then you send those 2 caps in, and you can get you get a baseball cap with the logo on it. You get a baseball cap of your choice. And I was like, well, that seems like okay. And I'm thinking about that a little bit. And then underneath it said, odds of winning. And it said, once you have your first cap, the odds of getting a match are 1 in 32. And I was like, okay, that's a true statement, but that's not the whole story. The whole story is that once you have your first cap, the chance of matching the first cap is 1 in 32. But if you don't match on the second cap, on the third cap, your chance is now 2 out of 32.
Which is 1 out of 16.
1 out of 16. And then you start going. By the time you get 6 caps, you're gonna match. There's a 50%. This is the birthday problem, right?
Yep.
It's the same as the birthday problem. All right. And so what I ended up doing, if I'm drinking one a day, within a week I'm gonna have a cap. Okay. And I started collecting the caps, and I got Jaguars, then I got Seahawks, and then I got Bears, and then I got Jaguars again. And I was within the first week I hit that. It might have been the first day. I was and then it's not like you have to start over at that point once you match. You just pull those guys out and just, so eventually you're getting it kind of converges to this thing about how often you're going to get a new cap. I got so many caps, Zach. I'd be like, hey, do you want a cap? You want a cap? You want a cap? And I was just the cap guy. And then I remember thinking, I don't know who did the stats for them, but this has got to be a money loss for them. It's got to be a money loss for them. And I read later that the stat team that they had hired to do that promotion was canned because they just they didn't do it right. They didn't sell enough to pay for the dues. Anyway.
That was back in the fun times of the early internet when they did those type of things too.
Well, the early internet and early anything online, it was things were.
Yeah, and now here we are in 2022, and it's all about blockchain and Bitcoin. Where's the fun in that?
When I was a kid, we used to drink Cokes out of glass bottles, and you pop the cap off. And on the inside of the cap would be it'd be a number, like a jersey number for one of the Packers, because we were in Wisconsin at the time. And you had to collect the caps, and if you got the whole offensive line, then you won a blocking sled or something like that. All right, and so, but that at least you got something on the inside of the cap. What you do now is you have to make an account, and get a password, and then you type in the little things, and then after a while you get like a free download of some song by somebody you've never heard of. I was like, no, give me a real prize where I take the cap, I give it to the merchant, and they give me a free bottle of dew. Right? But you know why they stopped doing that? The merchant then is sitting on all these caps that they have to turn back into to the distributor, because those caps are each worth $1.50 to them. The retailers must have hated that stuff.
Well, anyways, back to pudding.
Okay, well, back to pudding. Okay, so another thing about pudding, you've heard the proof is in the pudding. Okay, and that's a quote actually, and it goes way back like 1,000 years, but it's richly in the literature after Don Quixote in the 1600s. Okay, and Don Quixote says, "You will see it when you fry the eggs," meaning when it's all done, we're going to find out whether it worked or not. So like if you say, "Hey, Dad, I got a great idea for a podcast," and I say, "Well, the proof is in the pudding. We'll see if anybody shows up to listen." Okay, that's okay. That's where it comes from. But it's not really the proof is in the pudding. It's the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Okay, that's how it really should be.
You're really good at eating.
I'm good at eating, and I'm good at eating pudding. And in fact, you know what? I got to tell you this. The reason I bring this up is I got from a friend of the buff, heard that we get pudding when we get a 5-star.
You reward yourself, yes.
Well, okay, that's what I say. All right, that we get this pudding when we get a 5-star review, and so she sent me these things. She sent me the proof is in the pudding cups, okay, and they are, what'd you call it? We used to call them monkey dishes. What's the name?
Ramekin.
Isn't it that game like gin with the numbers?
Rummy Cube.
Tummy rub? What?
Rummy Cube.
A rummy cube. Okay, it's a little ceramic dish. Okay, and these dishes are called the proof is in the pudding, and on the side of the pudding cup, Zach, is printed one of 4 very famous math theorems. All right. And the proof of the theorem is actually printed on the inside of the bowl on the bottom.
So after you're done with eating your pudding, you get to see the proof.
Quite frankly, the proof is in the pudding. Okay. And those 4 proofs, okay, these are proofs that most mathematicians, any mathematician has heard of, and most regular people have heard of these too. The first one is the Pythagorean theorem. All right. And that says that if you have a right triangle, that the sum of the squares of the lengths of the legs is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Okay, so a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's a special case of the law of cosines, but that goes way back to Pythagoras, who was he before Alexander the Great? Zach, do you remember that?
He was.
Yeah, he was like a long, long time ago. He's like one of our ancient buddies.
He had a lot of stuff lost in the lighthouse of the library at Alexandria when that fell.
Yeah, so that was
he did more than what we just know him for.
Yeah, and they did all sorts of stuff back then. Keep in mind, they weren't dummies back then. They just didn't have the same technology, right? Okay, so that's the first one, is Pythagorean theorem. And that's relatively easy to prove. I remember we had to prove that in 10th grade. You can just draw yourself a little square and put the square inside the square, and you can just compute the area and show that the things line up. So that's not a big problem. The only thing you got to do is you got to verify that the angles on the inside square are 90 degrees. Do you know how to do that, Zach?
Yeah. Probably.
Yeah, I'll bet you could. Okay, that's okay. The second one is the proof that the square root of 2 is not a rational number. Okay, so a rational number is any number that can be written as
a rational number is one that is able to logically think about the outcome to a certain thing.
It makes its conclusions based upon previous information. It sequences all its. It's rational. Yes, a deductive number, right? Okay, so a rational number can be written as the ratio of 2 integers. Okay, so 2/3 is a rational number. Okay, 5 is a rational number because you can write it as 5/1. Okay, 4/3 is a rational number. It's 4/3. Okay. Now the square root of 2 is not rational. You can't write that number as the ratio of 2 integers. Okay. And this is a relatively easy thing to prove, Zach. So here's how the way you prove this is you do this by assuming the opposite of what you want to show and show that leads to a ridiculous statement. Okay, so if you want to show that the square root of 2 is irrational, what you do is you assume that it is rational and see where that leads you. Okay, so if I write that down, if I write square root of 2 equals p over q, all right, where p is an integer and q is an integer, all right, and it's not reducible, meaning you didn't write like 4 over 2 because they both have a factor of 2 and you take that out. So you're just going to assume that they share no common factors and that they're both integers. Okay, so if the square root of 2 is equal to p over q, you square both sides and you get 2 is equal to p squared over q squared, right?
Yep.
And you multiply both sides by q squared, and you get p squared is equal to 2 times q squared. Okay, and if p squared is equal to 2 times q squared, then that means that p squared must be even because it's 2 times something else. All right, so p squared is even, and if p squared is even, that means p is even, right? Which means that p must be equal to 2 times some other number, call it k. So p is equal to 2 times k, and if you plug in 2 times k for p in there and do some solving, you will get that q squared is equal to 2 times k squared, which means that q must also be even number, right? So basically, if you start by assuming it's rational, then you will prove that it can't be rational. That what you get is you get this situation that is ridiculous. You assumed that p and q did not have any common factors, and then you prove that they're both divisible by 2, right? And that doesn't make any sense, right? So that's how you prove that the square root of 2 is not rational. Okay, and then the next theorem is what I call Gauss's kindergarten theorem.
Yes.
Okay? And it says that the sum of the first n integers is n times n plus 1 over 2. Okay, so Gauss was, Gauss was? He was this guy who lived around 1800 or so, and he was from Germany or Austria or one of those guys, and he was one of these child prodigy math dudes.
Okay. So like me.
Kind of like you, all right? But a little bit more, Zach, even more rambunctious, okay? And he was being a smart aleck, like in kindergarten, because he was like this child genius guy, so nothing was very difficult for him. So he was being a bad kid, and the teacher said, "Okay, Carl, come on up here." And so he went up to the front of the class, and she said, "Okay, I want you to go to your desk, and I want you to add up all the numbers between 1 and 100." And she figured that would take him all morning because it would take her all morning because she was just a dummy, right? So he goes back to his desk and he sits down, and after about 30 seconds, he comes back up to the teacher and he says, the answer, of course he said this in German, and I don't know how to say it in German. He said, the answer is 5,050. And she was like, how'd you do that? He said, well, if I want to add them up, I take 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus ... plus 100, okay? And that's my total. Let's call it T, all right? Or I could write it the other way around, right? 100 plus 99 plus 98 plus ... plus 1. And that also is equal to T. And if I just add them up vertically then, I get the 1 plus the 100 gives me 101. I get 2 plus 99 gives me 101. 3 plus 98 gives me 101. All the way down the line, you get 101, okay? So on one side, I have 100 101s. On the other side, I have 2 times the total. So you divide both sides by 2, you get 50 times 101. 50 times 101, which is 5,050. Boom, you're done. Okay.
Yep.
Now he did it with 100, but it's not much of a.
I actually do that problem a lot. Sometimes when we're working out, we'll do a descending ladder. So you do 10 of a movement, 9 of a movement, 8 of a movement, all the way down to 1. And because I don't want to add up those big numbers, I do 10 plus 1, 9 plus 2, and you get 11. And then there's that many numbers, and then you end up with however many.
It's n times n plus 1 over 2. So it's 10 times 11 over 2. You get 55.
Yeah, and right? You do 55 movements. I'm like, oh, cool, we're doing 55 these things. And
right, so you're like Gauss, you're Gauss, but in the gym.
Yeah.
Right, so, but you can do it through 1 through n, and you just get n plus 1, you get that n times, and you divide by 2, you get n times n plus 1 over 2. Okay, so that's that proof, okay? And the last one is a very fun one, okay? And this is the proof that there is no largest prime number. There's an infinite number of prime numbers. Okay, so Zach, so you're going to help me do this one, okay?
I am.
So here's how you do it, okay? So what I'm going to demonstrate is that for any finite set of prime numbers, you can always find another one, okay? So we're going to start with a set of prime numbers, okay? Let's start with a pretty simple set, the set that contains 2, 3, and 5.
Okay.
Okay, so I got 2, 3, and 5 are three prime numbers, and I'm going to prove that the existence of that set of prime numbers implies that there's another prime number. Okay, so I'm going to, from the 2, the 3, and the 5, I'm going to multiply them all together, and I'm going to get 2 times 3 times 5 is?
2 times 3 is 6 times 5 is 6 times 5.
Which is 30.
30.
30, right. I get 30, okay? So I'm going to get 2 times 3 times 5 is 30, all right? And now notice that 30 is divisible by 2, obviously. It's divisible by 3, and it's divisible by 5, okay? Now, when I'm at 30, the next multiple of 2 after that is 32. The next multiple of 3 is 33, and the next multiple of 5 is 35, okay?
Yeah.
But 31 is right after 30, right? But it's not divisible by 2. It's not divisible by 3, and it's not divisible by 5, right? So I'm going to take the numbers in the set of prime numbers that I have. I'll take that set of numbers and I'll multiply them all together. That'll give me another number. I'll add 1 to that, and it'll push me right outside the edge. Okay? That number, when I added 1, is not divisible by any of the prime numbers I put in. Okay? But I know that it must have a prime number factorization. So it must have a prime number in it that's not in the set. Okay? And no matter what set you give me, no matter what finite set of numbers prime numbers that you give me, I can always find another number that doesn't have those primes as its factor. So when we did 2 times 3 times 5, and you add 1, you get 31. Well, the prime factorization of 31 is, well, it's 1 and 31. Right? So 31 is the prime number that's in there that gets, I kind of want to say generated, but it's the one that is required. So now I got 2, I got 3, I got 5, and I got 31. Right? And I do the same trick with that. I'm going to get another one that's going to get thrown into the mix. Right? And I can keep doing that. And
it's
no matter what
project for prime numbers.
It is the infinite cat project for prime numbers. That's exactly right. So essentially, once I do it for a finite set of size n, it happens for all of them. Right? There's no largest prime number. Right? So if you come to my house, Zach, and we have pudding, and the proof is in the pudding cups,
we have to do math.
You can wow all your friends by proving that there's no largest prime number, because I'll give you the prime number cup.
Yeah.
That's pretty slick, huh?
Yeah.
All right.
Bet you didn't think you were going to talk about that today.
I bet people listening,
you can put that pudding in your oven and bake it.
That's right. You can. Yeah, I have to make some pudding. I'm going to do that when I get back, Zach. I'm going to make some pudding. Anyway, that's where we are. That's a little bit about pudding. That's why. Okay, so you're wondering, well, why does Rafe get pudding if you get a fight? Well, this is why. This is a good thing.
I like sprinkles because they're colorful, but to each her own.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So would you do sprinkles on top of your pudding?
Why not? Sprinkles just add fun wherever they go. They're colorful and fun. They're just fun.
You know what they call them in the UK, right?
Yeah, hundreds and thousands.
That's right, because that's how many there are.
Yes, hundreds and thousands. All right. Well, do you have any other notes on pudding you would like to distill to our listeners? At
this stage, that's where I got. Right? There's 3 more of those little pudding cups here ready to last me the rest of the week, and I think that will be fine. And it's Zach, it's a great day to be doing a podcast with you, and I love talking about this stuff. So anyway, that's where we are.
All right. Well, that's good. Just remember, everybody, to eat more pudding, add a little more sprinkles, and to make sure that you have some fun. I want to thank you all for listening and to remind you to go seek the good, be the good, and spread the good. Enjoy the adventure of life.